Is Drew Brees serious about a return to the NFL, and could it happen with the New Orleans Saints? How would I grade this season's offseason versus others in the recent past, and why I think the New Orleans Saints are going to have double-digit wins this season? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on this Twitter Tuesday episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into this Tuesday episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. You can find me over at USA Today's Saints Wire Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. We want to get to your questions today as we go through our Twitter Tuesday. We'll talk a little bit about why I think the New Orleans Saints will be a double-digit win team this season. We'll also break down the success and perhaps grade of this year's offseason as compared to recent seasons. And there's one specific season you can look back at and say, okay, this kind of feels like that. And there was a lot of excitement ahead of that season for sure. But first, I want to talk a little bit about this Drew Brees news. So some news breaking around Drew Brees saying basically that he doesn't look like he's going to be returning to NBC. Maybe that report was premature. We don't know. It hasn't been confirmed yet because Drew Brees came out himself on Twitter and said that basically he could return to NBC, that any reports out there are a little premature or whatever, and that he would let people know what he's doing next. But that wasn't really it, was it? He also stirred the pot a little bit, mentioning that he could return to football, he could start training for pickleball or the senior golf tour. He also talked about coaching his kids. Bunch of different possibilities that he threw into that tweet. But the one that stood out and the one that everyone was kind of highlighting and has been talked about here recently was his comment about how he could return to football. And I've gotten a lot of questions ever since then. Should the New Orleans Saints try to get Drew Brees out of retirement? There was a report last season that when the Saints were dealing with all their injuries, that perhaps they talked to Drew Brees at one point. There were some other rumors that they talked to Phillip Rivers and things like that. But I'm going to tell you right here, right now, even though you can never say never in the NFL, and you can't be sure of anything, and you certainly can't be sure of anything with the New Orleans Saints, look at the way that their offseason has gone so far this offseason, right? Not the way that people might have expected, considering they started the offseason $70 million over the salary cap. Now, we knew better, but not everyone else did. So when you look at that, you can never say never. But what I will say is that probably never is the answer in terms of when Drew Brees will return to the NFL and be a quarterback in the NFL again. I just simply don't see that happening. He's 43. He left with mad injuries. I mean, his wife, Brittany, took to Instagram and outlined all the injuries that he had. I'm sure he's having a great time watching his kids grow up. I'm sure that he's having a great time with his time away. I don't look at Drew Brees and say that's a guy that's itching to get back to the football field. Now, I know a lot of people have sort of said, hey, but with the addition of Jarvis Landry and Tyrann Mathieu, it's clearly got him excited. He mentioned something on Instagram or some other social media platform that, hey, this kind of makes me want to go back to football. Okay, that's expressing excitement for your team and the things that you love and them making moves that you're very excited about. But remember, the New Orleans Saints just two off seasons ago, signed Malcolm Jenkins and Emmanuel Sanders. Basically the same moves, except that Tyrann Mathieu and Jarvis Landry are LSU Tigers and are hometown guys. So the passion is just different around those players considering that. So, but the roles that they were brought in to fill at that time versus at this time, not drastically different. Not the same, but not drastically different. So when I look at this and I see people kind of getting excited, like, oh, Drew Brees wants to come back to football. Even if he was to come back, does he still fit in this New Orleans Saints offense that's now been built around Jameis Winston, right? Like Drew Brees' offenses in the past have been offenses that have lived and died by yards after catch. We've watched them at the top of, since about 2017, the NFL charts when it comes to yards after catch, or at least within the top 5, top 7. Now you have an offense that's not really predicated on yards after catch, and it's going to be predicated on air yards. You have a deep threat receiver, legitimate bona fide deep threat receiver in Chris Olave, a guy that's going to get you yards up to his catch point every single time and may get some yards after catch every now and then for sure. Those will absolutely happen, but he's going to eat before the catch by creating separation and beating the defenders in front of him and playing bully ball. That's Michael Thomas. And you have Jarvis Landry, who, yes, as I mentioned the other day, gives you some yards after catch ability just because of his sheer will to not want to go down. He went down on less than 50% of his targets in open space in 2021. So yeah, he can pick you up some yardage after catch, but you're not going to rely on him to do that. And you know that Chris Olave, that's not the strongest part of his game. And that's probably the one knock that everyone has had on him. So you can't rely on that outside of anybody, basically, but Deontay Hardy and Alvin Kamara. And so for me, I look at that and I say, I think this New Orleans Saints team, they're ready to turn the page. They're ready to keep moving forward. They have that era is in the books. The Drew Brees, Sean Payton era of the New Orleans Saints, it's in the books. When Sean Payton comes back to coaching, because I believe he will, it probably won't be in New Orleans. It'll be somewhere else. All of that makes sense. This is a team and a franchise and an organization that's ready to turn the page. And Drew Brees every now and then is going to crack jokes. Just let the man crack jokes, right? He's not coming back. I don't think he's coming back to the New Orleans Saints. And I really, really doubt he's coming back to the NFL as a whole. That wasn't the only news, though, that sort of sent a little bit of excitement through New Orleans Saints fans. I want to quickly mention the Saints have also made 5 roster moves, including waiving three players that included Jalen McCleskey, the son of former New Orleans Saint J.J. McCleskey, who had a pretty nice standout camp last year, but didn't really get the opportunity to do much around some injuries and things like that. But the Saints also signed a couple of players. The highlight here being bringing back running back Devine Ozigbo. Now, we talked about Latavius Murray and Devontae Freeman being kind of potential reunions for the New Orleans Saints as they're looking to continue to fill out that running back room in preparation to potentially not have Alvin Kamara for some stretch of games in 2022 at some point. No clarity on that just yet, but bringing back Devine Ozigbo, really, really good move for them. He was somebody that stood out in the preseason as well as throughout training camp in his stint with them back in 2019 as an undrafted free agent rookie, has had a couple of other stops, other places, including another stop with the New Orleans Saints, now back with the New Orleans Saints. He was somebody that fans were really, really upset to lose because of his standout ability in the preseason, especially coming off of a year where they ended up moving on from Boston Scott, who I believe had the highest touchdown percentage of all running backs last season. So getting a guy back like Devine Ozigbo is somebody that can come in, is familiar with the system. It's another reunion, something the Saints are very comfortable with, and somebody that could potentially push to make the roster, as he has made rosters on other NFL teams in the past, and this time at a position where the New Orleans Saints have a bit of a need. Coming up next, let's get to your questions. I want to start off with what I think I would grade this New Orleans Saints offseason based on off-seasons in the recent past. So how does this one hold up? How does this one stack up? I'll tell you why there's an off-season that it feels pretty familiar with, and that's something that should be exciting as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, I get to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar. The incredible Built Puff birthday cake flavor is now available. Go get it because it's a limited time only, and it's even more limited because these special edition flavors, they sell out very, very quickly. It's protein-infused marshmallow protein bar. Does it get any cooler than that? Yes, when you flavor it like a birthday cake. So it's really, really, really awesome. So go and check them out at built.com. Go ahead and grab yourself a box of those Built Puff birthday cake flavors. You can also check out cinnamon churro, banana cream cake is out there as well. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can see. You can also get a mix box, try a bunch of their standard flavor guys like mint chocolate, mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, all that. High in protein, but low in sugar, low in carbs, really, really high in deliciousness as well. So head over to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15. Doesn't matter if it's your first or your next order, you're going to get 15% off with that promo code. Once again, it's 15% off with the promo code LOCKed15 at built.com. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen or watch of the day every day. Don't forget, go and check out Locked On Pelicans, Jake Madison. The NBA lottery is tonight. Who should you be hoping for? What should you be listening for? What should you be hoping and wishing for? You can find all of that over at Locked On Pelicans today with Jake Madison. You can also check out the Locked On NBA lottery mock draft as well, which goes live today also. Okay. So I want to dive into some of your questions here from Twitter, Facebook, all over the place. I want to start off with this question here from Paul, who asks, how would I grade this offseason as compared to recent ones, right? Ones in the recent past. So I'm going to say recent ones starting with 2017. 2017 was really exciting because the Saints had those 2 first-round selections. They had Marshon Lattimore and they had Ramczyk, 2 premier position players, all of that. And then you saw these other guys rise, right? Alvin Kamara, Trey Hendrickson, Marcus Williams, of course, all of that, Al-Quadin Muhammad. You saw that draft class really pick up steam as well, but you really got excited about those 2 first-round selections. And I think that's how you should kind of feel this year as well. I mean, leading off with the draft, getting those 2 first-round selections in Chris Olave and Trevor Penning after losing big pieces over on your defensive side and your offensive side as well, if you include like Terron Armstead in that equation, of course, as well. If you remember back to coming out of 2016, there wasn't a lot of hope for the New Orleans Saints team because the roster was already kind of not so great at that point. So the Saints walked into this offseason in a situation to where the roster could have been viewed as not so great at the very best. And what have they done so far? They replaced Marcus Williams with Marcus Maye. They bring in some guys that are going to be underrated signings, just like they did with Malcolm Brown a few years ago, bringing in Kentavious Street, who I think can be a bit of a difference maker, maybe more than we're giving him credit for in the interior defensive line. He should get some reps. Bringing in guys like Jaleel Johnson as well, bringing in some of those veteran presences that can come in and help this team and their younger players continue to develop. Then you cap all of that off with the post-draft signings of Tyrann Mathieu and Jarvis Landry, who give you a leader, bona fide leader on both sides of the ball, bona fide playmakers on both sides of the ball that immediately impact what your ability is to be able to limit opposing offenses, in Tyrann Mathieu's case, and the Saints defense. And you're in a situation, too, to where you've now put together an offense with Chris Olave in the draft, Michael Thomas returning from injury, and then Jarvis Landry signing, where you should be able to produce some points as well, even if you're without Alvin Kamara for some portion of that 2022 season. Now, you still got to figure out the tight end room. You got to figure out what you're going to do in place of Alvin Kamara in the running back room, but there's time to figure all that out. You've got training camp to see all of it. And one sort of big piece that we don't talk about enough is the fact that Will Lutz will be back in 2022. And so when you look at particularly the 2 games, the first home game or the first game against the Atlanta Falcons and then the Tennessee Titans game, where Will Lutz either could have won you the game, could have put you in a situation to where you weren't going for 2 points at the end of the game twice in the Titans situation. And so you're just in a better situation as a whole. So you kind of had this big draft, big free agency, and then this kind of like second free agency where you're getting Michael Thomas back, you're getting Will Lutz back, you're getting those pieces back that end up making your team complete for the first time since 2020. Another offseason that you can look at that I would grade this one against would be the 2019 offseason, where you saw the Saints go with a little bit more of a cautious draft approach, right? A safer draft approach. They went up and they got Eric McCoy, who ended up filling in for them at center immediately. He made a big difference. The Saints didn't have a first-round selection in that draft. They waited around until 105, and then they took a safe swing at an impact player like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who has been a big-time difference maker for them over on the defensive side. But then in free agency, they were a little bit more aggressive. You saw them add to guys like Jared Cook. You saw them add in Emmanuel Sanders. You saw them add in Malcolm Jenkins, which is kind of akin to the Tyrann Mathieu and Jarvis Landry signings this offseason. So those pieces are similar. So it's kind of a combination of both, right? Like the excitement around the draft feels similar, and then the excitement around free agency feels similar to 2019. And so I think with those 2 things put together, plus the injured pieces that you're getting back, this is a New Orleans Saints team that you should be very excited about. So I would give this probably like in the B to A range. I'll keep it a cautious B for right now, but ready to elevate that to an A if they can figure out tight end, if they bring back Quan Alexander, if they can figure out running back, and if they can, keep all of that together going into camp, that pretty quickly becomes an A. Now I want to go to Tony's question here to wrap up this segment, or the first pair of questions here before we get to our second pair. Keeping on the rookie theme here, what's the most likely outcome for Trevor Penning, or which of these 2 scenarios is the most likely outcome for Trevor Penning? Week 1 starter at left tackle, or 6 offensive linemen with James Hurst at left tackle? And I think that the most likely scenario, because it's what the Saints want, and they've been very clear about that. Doug Marrone talking about it, Zach Strief talking about, being able to, having some really, really good things to say. We'll actually roll a clip in tomorrow's episode or Thursday's episode with Brooke Kirchhoffer from WWL TV having a conversation with Zach Strief about Trevor Penning. He had some great things to say about him. And I think when you look at all of that, plus Dennis Allen telling you after the draft that the intent is for him to be your starter at left tackle, not to move in the right tackle or anything like that. Like they envision him as a long-term starter at left tackle, then that makes that the most likely scenario. There are a couple of things that would get in the way. There's always the wild card of injuries, of course. There's always the wild card that maybe he doesn't develop in time, but it just doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Everything that we've heard about his character suggests that that's not really that much of a concern. So I look at the most likely of those two scenarios being a week 1 starter at left tackle. Him being a 6th offensive lineman with James Hurst at left tackle is no failure at all. That's a great situation to come into as a rookie, but it just doesn't seem that that's what the Saints are really looking to do with him in 2022. I'll tell you the least likely situation is that he starts at right tackle. I'll tell you that much. All right, coming up next, I want to dive into and wrap up with a couple of other questions here. What are the New Orleans Saints going to do at a very, very, very important position that no one's talking about? I'll tell you what position it is and what they might do there and why it's important as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we get to that, the grade that I would give Rock Auto is an absolute A+, because it is the easiest, fastest, and best place to go, easy to navigate, easy to find everything that you need when it comes to finding the appropriate part, piece, accessory, whatever it is that you're looking for your vehicle. If you've got a 2008 Hyundai Sonata and you need a new, let's say, catalytic converter, fine, easy to find. You go let them know your make, your model, you let them know the year, and then what part, piece, or accessory you're looking for, and they're going to give you several options, several choices at that spot, as opposed to you having to go through the dealership and pay way more than is necessary, or go into one of those name brand stores and end up being in a situation to where you're going to be upcharged because you're a do-it-yourselfer and you're not a wholesale professional buyer. That's not the case over at rockauto.com. Everyone pays the same price, so don't waste any time. You need something for your vehicle, go and get it where you can get it at the right price and where you can get it right away. You don't have to worry about somebody disappearing for 20 minutes just to tell you that they can order it. Cut the middleman out. You can do it at home on your couch. Nice, easy, simple. rockauto.com. Whenever you get to checkout, though, don't forget to let them know that Locked On sent you by writing Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a little bit of contract detail for you before we get to our final questions for Twitter Tuesday. Jarvis Landry, the 1-year deal that was expected to be up to $6 million in value. All of those parameters are correct, but the base value of the contract is just $3 million. A fantastic, fantastic structure. Big time win for the New Orleans Saints, who get a guy that's going to be able to have an impact on their offense and basically pay him a floor of $3 million. And this was what we were talking about. There were a lot of people who said, oh, I don't want Jarvis in New Orleans because they're going to have to pay him $15 million. That doesn't happen when you sign as a free agent in May. It never happens, right? Those guys don't ever get that type of money at that point. This became an opportunity to instead of looking at the money, to look at best fit, best opportunity, where you can fit in terms of a scheme fit, and then potentially get out in 2023 to the market again, and then start to look for the money that folks were kind of thinking about when it came to Jarvis Landry, or potentially return to New Orleans if he feels like the opportunity is right for him there. And we know that the New Orleans Saints can bond and really, really get a good relationship built with players based on how hard they work to make sure that those players get the incentives that they build into their contracts. Think back to Emmanuel Sanders in 2019. Okay. Now, as we continue on with our Twitter Tuesday questions, I want to give a shout out to Hunter here, who asked, what does the gunner position look like in 2022? So we just talked about the importance of getting Will Lutz back from the special team side, but this is another big piece that the New Orleans Saints were not the usual New Orleans Saints in 2021 in terms of their ability or inability to stop the punt return situation. They allowed the second most punt returns in 2022 and the most punt return yards across the NFL. That was coming off of a season where they set a record for the least punt return yards allowed, and it wasn't up to the kickers. I know that the kickers changed, or the punters changed, whoever Thomas Moore said, to Blake Gillikin, but Blake Gillikin played a fantastic season in 2022. Had some situations where he shanked a couple of punts here and there and things like that. They happen, but he had a really, really fantastic 2022 or 2021. So where was the deficiency? And the deficiency could have been in the coverage units, right? And so we saw JT Gray, who played, make sure I get the number right here, 77 snaps at gunner in 2021, the most on the team. He was a first-team All-Pro specialist. You know he's going to be there, but who's going to be the guy opposite him? 3 possibilities that I'm going to highlight. And these aren't the only possibilities, but these are 3 that I'm going to highlight. Rookie, Alontae Taylor, if he doesn't win the cornerback spot opposite Marshon Lattimore. He's already somebody that they've said can have an impact there. They could potentially even give him snaps there if he's playing at starting corner, but I don't think you usually do that with your starting corner. For instance, Paulson Adebo did take some snaps at gunner last year, but less than 10. Smoke Monday, the undrafted free agent safety out of Auburn, one of the best when it comes to downhill speed, great at taking angles from outside in, struggles from going inside out, and one of the hardest hitters, if not the hardest hitter in this year's draft class. He's somebody to keep an eye out on. And then Bryce Thompson, who did take snaps for the Saints at gunner last season. He took less than 10, but he did get those reps there. They like Bryce Thompson a lot. He's got good speed. He's a good hitter as well, so he would be another one that I would keep an eye out on. So let's talk a little bit about who did it last year and who exactly you're replacing, because there's a specific player that you're looking to replace in this situation. We talked about JT Gray, 77 snaps at gunner. Following that, the next highest with 50 snaps at gunner was wide receiver / running back Ty Montgomery. Ty Montgomery, now a New England Patriot. This is the spot you're looking to fill. So this could be a situation where you're looking at a guy like Alontae Taylor, Smoke Monday, Bryce Thompson to slide in there. Just for edification's sake, the next best or the next most snaps at gunner last year was Kevin White. And then behind that, you had groupings of like Kawan Baker and Kavari Russell, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Jeff Heath, Paulson Adebo, who all took less than 10, less than 5 in some cases as well. But I think those are going to be your 3 names to watch, although somebody could sneak in there and become somebody at that spot as well. And then to wrap us up, we're going to go to Cam. Ross, how confident are you in this team next year? I think the New Orleans Saints are going to be a double-digit win team in 2022. I predicted them as finishing 12-5. Then they turn around and sign Jarvis Landry. I'm not going to say that's going to make them 13-4 or 15 and whatever, but what I will say is that it makes 12-5 a little bit more likely, right? Because now you're in a situation where you're not only looking at a defense that's going to be able to hang with some of the best offenses in the NFL, but you're looking at an offense that should be able to put points on the board, that should be able to convert first downs. The Saints were amongst the top 10 or bottom 10 when it came to first downs converted into, or first downs gained, in 2021. They were at the top, like we mentioned, in terms of punts, and they were at the bottom when it came to passing yards. None of that should be the same situation in 2022. You have to keep the turnovers down, but you can bring everything else up. And if you can keep the turnovers manageable, then you're in a situation. And the only reason why I mentioned keeping the turnovers manageable is because if you throw the ball more, you're at a high variant offense, right? High variance offense means throwing the ball a lot. And the New Orleans Saints will probably be throwing the ball a lot. So they're inherently going to be high variance in that case. So you have to be able to manage all of that, right? Especially if you're pushing the ball downfield, which the Saints should be looking to do more in 2022. So I think you look at that and you look at the fact that the NFC is not good. It's not good. You've got probably the Green Bay Packers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Los Angeles Rams probably at the top, and then maybe the Dallas Cowboys in there. And then after that, who's competing in the NFC? Basically everyone else. And I think the New Orleans Saints, along with the San Francisco 49ers perhaps, are probably at the top of that class in terms of second-tier teams in the NFC. So I really have a hard time believing that the New Orleans Saints can't pull off double-digit wins next season. I have a hard time believing that the New Orleans Saints can't be a playoff team in 2022, even if it means that they're a wild card team. They don't have to win their division to get into the playoffs, right? So for me, my expectations, my confidence in the New Orleans Saints are pretty high. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't expect to have a very high confidence about this team going into 2022. I was ready to kind of quell expectations and kind of calm expectations a little bit going into the season because you lost Sean Payton, you didn't have Drew Brees, yada, yada, right? You had the coordinator changes, the co-defensive coordinator thing, which I was a little bit shaky about at first. All of those things were big-time question marks. But now you've gone from a situation to where you don't have the question marks, but you didn't necessarily have the roster either because of injuries and all the other things that happened in 2021. And now you've got the roster, and maybe you have some of the question marks, but you have the scheme that can support the roster, and you have the talent that can maximize the scheme. That's different for the New Orleans Saints. It's not to say that they didn't have talent in the past. Of course they had talent in the past. But you're in a situation here when you're coming out of 2021 where talent was a bit of a concern because of all the injuries and you were playing toward the bottom of your depth chart. You had the scheme, but you didn't have the talent. Now you've got the scheme because Pete Carmichael's scheme is Sean Payton's scheme. Some things are going to be different. You're not going to see as much of the Taysom Hill, rotation, but you still have the scheme. And now you've got the talent to maximize that while the scheme works to maximize the talent right back. That's a big deal. And that's why the New Orleans Saints are going to win 10 plus games in 2022. All right, y'all. Coming up tomorrow, what did Zach Strief have to say about Trevor Penning and why should we continue to be excited about this New Orleans Saints draft class. There's a lot of good stuff going on in terms of free agency, but let's not forget that this draft class is still one that can sort of be boom or bust, and a lot of opportunity for boom going into 2022. I'll tell you why tomorrow. And of course, we'll continue to break down everything else around the New Orleans Saints in addition to that. I appreciate you as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out that Locked On NFL YouTube page. You want to hear what Luke Braun has to say with me on Tuesday's episode of Locked On NFL about Drew Brees? Come through and have some fun. We'll be over there. Be a lot of fun over there. So I appreciate you as always, making me a part of your day. Don't forget, for everything else you need around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.